Paul, I'd love to start with your story. Back in 1986, what inspired you to formulate one of the first fermented supplements on the market?
Well, I had a natural food store in 1979. I've always been attracted to, or as long as I can remember, attracted to whole foods. And in my health food store, customers were coming in and they were taking, in 1979, started taking vitamins and minerals much like I did. But like them, I had an experience where I had kind of a queasy stomach after I took the vitamins and minerals. And having seen that now or then hundreds, if not thousands of times, I was moved to create a vitamin and a mineral that the body could utilize. And that was, it was a common sense thing in that vitamins and minerals, the way they were commonly used, were in their isolated or more chemical form. And so what I did was turning the vitamins and minerals into a highly utilizable fermented food form. And that was really at the root of the success of the company New Chapter.
That sounds so interesting, Paul. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Given that you're an expert on gut health, why is gut health so important to you and really for all of us?
Well, I think it goes way, way back in that, back to the Greek physician Hippocrates. He said all diseases begin in the gut. And there's immense truth to that. We've known that forever, and we each experience it. They get that queasy stomach, and we know we haven't eaten something that's good for us, or it doesn't nourish us properly. So for me, it was very clear that if you can get good digestion, you are not only what you eat, but you are what you absorb. And those food elements that we either digest or don't digest, that will to a great extent determine whether we're feeling healthy and vibrant or whether we're feeling nauseous and not so good. And you do that over a period of time, Andrea. What happens is you start getting, you're not listening to your body. And over time, 6 months, a year, 5 years, the body comes back with a disease. And that's what ultimately why Hippocrates said diseases begin in the gut. So being in this field, it's been a primary target of interest.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think many of us understand that the gut health is really, it's important, but we hear the word gut, we hear the word colon, we hear the word microbiome. What is the microbiome for those who are maybe new to the term?
We're learning virtually every day a better and more complete answer to that question, Andrea. But approximately, there's close to 100 trillion cells. That's a big number, right?
A lot.
At least 500 species that are living on us and in us. And that those are composed of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, viruses, and all of these elements make up our microbiome. It's considered by many scientists to be the forgotten organ. And that forgotten organ, some say, is the most metabolically active organ of your body. And let me just give you a little frame here. Think of your body as human genetic activity. We count about 23,000 human genes. Contrast that to the microbiome that we walk around with in us and on us. That's about 3+ million genes. So whoever we think we are, we must include this microbiome that's in us and around us and is creating a host of compounds, vitamins, important enzymes, and a critical part of our immune system.
One of the first things that comes to mind for myself when I think of the microbiome is I think probiotics. And probiotics, I mean, a term that it's been around for a very, very long time. Can you explain, please, why probiotics are so good for our immune system? Like, what's that tie-in?
Probiotics are creating literally, according to one reference, hundreds of thousands of compounds.
Okay.
And when they're creating these compounds, they're basically doing it for their own, they take the food that we eat and they help in our digestion. And there's a synergistic, friendly relationship between us and our microbiome. The degree to which there's friendship there determines to a great extent how healthy we are. So when those fungi and bacteria and viruses are all in harmony and are all connected, what's happening is they're producing a host of important enzymes and vitamins and antimicrobial substances that go by a big word called bacteriocins. And those compounds are what's so critical for maintenance of a healthy balance in our microbiome. And then what happens is they're also creating a healthy barrier between determining what's going from your digestive system into your bloodstream. So if they form a healthy barrier, again, the body will then determine good stuff going in and bad stuff moving along. Probiotics also are able to activate key immune cells that release important anti-inflammatory cytokines. That's another big word, but those compounds, those cytokines, can have significant anti-inflammatory potential. And we now know over the past 15 or 20 years that inflammation is at the root of so many of our chronic diseases of aging, like cancer and heart disease and obesity and diabetes. They're all related to inflammation. And that's where, again, if you have too much inflammation, your immune cells can't hear and can't be wise. They can't do an appropriate surveillance to determine who's friend and who's foe.
Right. Which makes a lot of sense. So maybe you could just explain really quickly what cytokines are.
Cytokines are a host of compounds that are either pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory in nature. And so these are compounds also known as immunoglobulins. These are compounds that are part of our immune reaction. So contrary to what most people might suspect, if I ask you, Andrea, now you're an expert, so you know the right answer to this, but if I were to ask you as someone who hasn't studied the field, is inflammation good for you or is it bad for you?
Right.
And what would most people say?
They would probably say bad, but I'm going to say it's actually both.
Exactly. Well, that's the right answer. And so we need both pro-inflammatory cytokines because they're part of the immune reaction. So if the immune cell sees a bad player or a player it needs to reduce, what's going to happen is the body's going to increase inflammation. That's why we get a fever. The body increases a fever in order to burn off the more unfriendly foes. And so now in balance, there has to be the anti-inflammatory component. And that's why we refer to it as a wiser immune system. You can't just have a boosted, amplified, stimulated immune system. If you do that, then you've only got one part of the picture. You've got to have both.
And I think now what experts all agree on is that it's chronic inflammation that is the root of diseases. So inflammation is good for us, but when it's that underlying chronic inflammation that causes the issue. I just want to go back to probiotics for a minute.
Yes.
Are there certain probiotics that are more beneficial for us when it comes to immune system, like to our immune system and keeping us healthier and boosting or supporting it?
Absolutely. And I think I don't want to undermine all of the hundreds, if not thousands of species that are all hanging out there. I think they each play their role. And let me just put in one of these classes, there's this whole class called commensals. And those are the class of bacteria that we don't really know what they're doing. They're just hanging out there. but they play a really, really important part in maintaining a healthy environment. Most importantly, one microbiologist told me the most important thing they do is they do no harm. Now, on the very positive side, probably the most researched strain in the world is called Lactobacillus Remnosus GG. And that is a strain that I've been really interested in for a long time. I take it myself. And that strain, the real beauty of that strain is it produces a group of compounds, one of protein that they've recently discovered called P40. This compound has a significant immunomodulating impact, and particularly is anti-inflammatory. Another strain that I really like and that I also take is Bifidobacteria breve, BRO3. And that particular strain, when it interacts with certain foods, like flaxseed, for example, another food that I love and use daily, part of the reason why flaxseed is so good for us, besides the omega-3s, is that flaxseed, when it interacts with breve, remember I said earlier that hundreds of thousands of compounds are created? Well, one of the special compounds that's created with breve, Bifidobacteria breve, is a compound, it's a flavonoid called herbacetin. And that is a really important immunomodulating compound. It's been shown to have significant antiviral activity. So I really, really love Bifidobacteria breve. And so those are two examples. The other one that I also am now utilizing as part of my daily routine is another lactobacillus. These are like superheroes in the world of probiotics. And I've been making probiotics. My first product was in 1982, and it was a probiotic. We didn't know the term back then. We just said friendly bacteria. But since then, I have studied probiotics, and this probiotic that is called Lactobacillus plantarum, a specific strain called DR7, activates an enzyme called AMPK, and that enzyme sustains your cellular energy. And so what we're talking about here, Andrea, is that you can imagine this incredible opportunity you have to reinforce your health by just manipulating some of these co-pilots that are joining you in this journey we call life.
No, I love that you're saying that. And as you're talking, and because you're such an expert when it comes to probiotics, my first thought, another thought that comes to mind for me is, should we be taking these probiotics every single day? And from what it sounds like to me, based on what you're talking about, it's that diversity of probiotics. That's what's the key to get into our body on a daily basis. Am I correct with that?
Yes. And when we eat sauerkraut, for example, like I eat sauerkraut daily and I have yogurt daily, there are certain foods that are going to give you your daily supplement of incredibly valuable probiotics. So in that case, it's really important that we take them on a regular basis. Now, what's really interesting to me, Andrea, is I had no idea the impact of stress on the microbiome. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever experienced stress in your life. You don't look like...
No, not at all. Stress, I'm completely immune to it. Oh my gosh. I've got like 3 kids. I run 2 businesses. I'm familiar with it.
So along with stress, within a few days have you ever been angry? Have you ever experienced anger before?
Again, Paul, I think I'm immune to all of that.
Yeah, that's good.
Of course I get angry. Okay. Ask my kids, they'll tell you yes.
Anger or fear trigger within just a few hours can trigger a fairly dramatic shift in your microbiome. So it really highlights the importance of daily microbiome probiotic supplementation. One of the most exciting things about DR7, the plantarum species that I use, is that it's been shown to both modulate the cortisol levels, the stress response, serotonergic, dopaminergic, all those different responses, stress responses. And they help your body because you go through anger or fear and you've got to quickly rejuvenate your microbiome.
And especially now, right, with everything that's going on in the world, stress is so rampant for so many of us. So I think that's an important point that you're making.
Yes, absolutely.
Paul, can you explain what the connection is between our digestion and our immune system?
Yeah, I think the way I've described it, that our inflammation is profoundly affected by the foods that we eat and by the microbiome that we walk around with. There's a tremendous impact if we have the right microbiome. They can protect us. It can protect us from opportunistic species that are not wanting to play nice in the sandbox. The other side of the story is that there's recently been uncovered, not only do we know that there is a microbiome in our gut, and that microbiome in our gut affects our immune system, but we also now know that it affects our lungs. And in light of the fact that we now know that we have a microbiome issue with our lung health, considering we're in the midst of immune challenges, it's really, really important to always maintain a healthy microbiome for a healthy gut-lung axis. So it's believed, and it's all new science, Andrea, but it's believed that a lot of this impact is through the lymphatic system, that there's a crosstalk between what's going on in your gut. Everything is connected. It's like, what was that old, your knee bone is connected to your, whatever that thing is. It is absolutely a connection between all these different microbiomes on your skin. I've studied the skin microbiome. It's absolutely amazing on all the different regions, how they all crosstalk. Certain species like reuteri can actually produce the neurotransmitter or upregulated oxytocin. Other ones can produce norepinephrine. So these are all producing important compounds that impact daily our immune system and our lung health.
That's fascinating. What's the difference between prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics?
Right. Great question. So a prebiotic is something you take that your probiotics are going to like to eat. Right. And some things they may eat that they are going to produce a certain group of compounds that may not be as good for you. How does this sound? This word, putrescine. Does that sound pretty good?
No, not so good.
Yeah, putrescine, as in putrid. That doesn't sound very good. And so if you feed the bacteria in your gut certain types of compounds that are not necessarily the ones the bacteria are going to most like to digest, they could produce compounds that will not be as good for you. Okay. On the other hand, if you eat foods like bananas and onions and asparagus and apples, rich in compounds called polyphenols, that's a really important word. It's a group of compounds in our diet, like blueberries and broccoli. These are the foods that the healthy, friendly bacteria and the microbiome love to produce for us. So I look at my microbiome, Andrea, much like a farmer would look at his land. I must take care of my microbiome and feed it the right foods. And so prebiotic are those foods. Probiotic are the friendly bacteria that are going to do the most good for you, the ones that are ancient strains that have been part of the human microbiome probably for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And then postbiotics are the real jewels. They are the ones that are making, if they turn grape juice into wine, or they turn cabbage into sauerkraut, or milk into yogurt, or soy into miso. And those foods, before they have been converted through fermentation, they're nowhere near as good for you. And the reason why they're so good for you is because of the postbiotics that they're producing, the vitamin B12, all of these different compounds, like vitamin K2, these are really, really important compounds that sustained our long-term health.
Yeah, also like fulvic acid and glutathione, those are all considered those
Correct.
probiotics.
Very good.
Paul, one of the terms, it's newer to me, that I learned from you is called parabiotics. How does that compare to the pre, pro, and postbiotics you just mentioned?
Great. It's always fun to learn something new in the field, and I just learned this in the last few years. Paraprobiotics are actually cells that are no longer alive. And that what we do know is that when you take, you would think, oh, the probiotic must be alive in order to do its good work. There is some evidence, Andrea, that even when the cell is no longer alive and has actually been heat sterilized, that the cell wall components can modulate an anti-inflammatory response. And so part of what I'm attracted to when I create a fermentate, after I grow products, what I'm really, really interested in is the cells that are no longer alive, because they also have significant biological activity. So in reality, I call it the 4 Ps: pre, pro, post, and para. And those are the 4 that a product really needs to offer.
And this is why I love my job so much. I mean, I've been in the health industry for 20 years, but yet there's things I don't know. And that's why looking to someone like yourself, who's an expert, and really when it comes to gut health and learning about all this. So thanks for sharing that, because, and you're right, I love learning new things. So that's exciting. Is there anything else that you didn't cover today that you'd like to cover on gut health before we end the interview? Anything that's inspiring you lately that you'd like to share?
I just want to reemphasize the importance of a mind-body relationship.
Yeah.
That it's just, all this stuff is, one of my teachers used to always say, if you sit down to a bowl of broccoli and you just had an argument with your loved one, it's not going to be any better for you than if you sat down to a McDonald's burger and we're in a loving relationship. So we have to be careful in our field to always emphasize the importance of a harmonious life around ourselves. So I think that's really, really important.
And that is so well said, Paul, and such a great way to end today's interview. Thank you for watching video number 1 of Paul Schulick's 3-part video series, The Wiser Immune System, A Holistic Approach. Make sure you subscribe for updates on paulschulick.com. Coming up in video number 2, we'll talk through common misconceptions about immune supplements. To find the notes from this episode, as well as more insights and resources about immunity, visit paulschulick.com.